Welcome back to Profiteers versus the People, the show where we put the mega wealthy under the magnifying glass. Today, we are continuing our series on big tech's evil genius, Peter Thiel. For those who are just joining us, just fucking go back and listen to the first one. Seriously, who starts a series on episode 2? Fucking monsters. But I'm Money Mike.
I'm Red Bill.
And...
This is Profiteers versus the People. So, thank you again, Deco19, for putting us on this. When we last spoke, we'd gotten to Thiel's book release, which he hoped would fetch him the fame he needed to get a footing as a macro investor. But it turned out to be nothing more than a fart in the wind. Apparently, this is a thing. I cannot imagine reading a Sean Hannity book and being like, I want to give that guy money.
What I also don't understand is I feel like 65% of the notoriety that provocateurs achieve is from negative commentary of people on the other side. No one gives people that they don't like money.
What's going on?
I just don't get that connection. Like, I asked the question in the last episode, like, what was the plan here? But
where he'd expected a response more in line with dropping a bomb, he instead got a few enthusiastic pats from conservative provocateurs, and like many of them, was soon forgotten. Beyond the tired political BS, the other reason no one cared about this was because it was Silicon Valley in the 90s. Peter Thiel's fund spent a year losing money investing in currencies before he shifted his attention to what everyone in that day and age wanted to invest in, which was tech.
Yeah, it's totally missing the forest among the trees. Like, the dude's looking overseas for these really niche investments, and literally in his backyard is Apple.
We'll see this a lot. It's a problem that plagues Peter Thiel. His big brain gets in the way of the little shit. Tech is going to be big, but the real money is in currency trading. Though men like Mark Andreessen of Netscape fame made a fortune in what seemed like mere minutes, Jim Clark, who none of you have heard of, made far more by funding it. Where Andreessen made $58 million on the day of Netscape's IPO, Jim, who provided seed capital and courted venture capitalists, made 10 times that amount. Where the faces of Silicon Valley at the time lived modestly, Jim bought a giant boat with his winnings and got himself a $125 million divorce.
Hell yeah.
This is the path Thiel sought. Now, I'm going to posit something at the start of this episode, which is that although Peter Thiel was a smart man, and he was, his greatest gift is luck. Period. End of story. Peter does not make friends. He makes fans. He doesn't talk to people. He preaches at them, which is what he was failing at in 1998. He'd funded a few modest startups and had taken to appearing as a guest speaker on Stanford's campus. Max Levchin was 23 at this point and hailed from Ukraine. There, he learned how to code at a young age while helping his mom at work, and then fortified his skills on old Soviet computers and calculators, and in his free time, he'd even practiced the art just on pen and paper. The book, The Contrarian, which is our main source for this series, claims that Max learned English by watching Different Strokes. This isn't true. He just used it to get rid of his thick Soviet accent, and then he got into university and spent 4 years talking like Gary Coleman and learning cryptography.
Dude, what is it with our fucking profiteers in cryptography? This is like the third person we've read on who, like, read the Da Vinci Code and decided that they wanted to be more like the albino monk. I don't fucking get it.
Cryptography is a stupid and archaic skill at this time, which would prove extremely valuable in Silicon Valley in just a few years, which was his next stop. When he moved to Palo Alto, Max lived on the floor of a not air-conditioned living room, and during hot summer days, he would attend guest lectures on Stanford's campus, where he would basically find a comfy chair in the back and nap. One such nap session was scheduled to take place in a guest seminar about currency manipulation, hosted by Peter Thiel. Now, Thiel was lucky for a few key reasons here. Namely, he's such a terrible public speaker that only 6 people showed up for this event. He's also lucky that Levchin isn't a sociopath and thus couldn't bring himself to nap during Peter's unattended event without the ironic privacy provided by people sitting all around you. So, Levchin listens. He feels he's obligated to do so. He's one of 6 people listening to this man speak in a large room.
Oof.
Yeah. The two strike up a conversation afterwards based on a mutual friend, Luke Nosik, who I guess would never have connected the two if this hadn't happened. They met the following morning for coffee, and this time Levchin spoke and Thiel listened. Levchin raved about the Palm Pilot and how they would be everywhere soon.
You know, he was right for like a total of 10 minutes.
He was so close to just saying something prophetic here. Max Levchin saying Palm Pilots are going to be everywhere is off dimensionally, just in the dimensions of the device, and he's off by about 10 years. Because the iPhone came out in 2008. It looked almost identical to a Palm Pilot. It's a Palm Pilot without the pen. Palm Pilots could send messages over a dial-up connection if you plugged them into a jack and suffered through the noise. Ba-dang, ba-dang, that one. And Max figured they would be used far and wide in professional settings in no time if you could just encrypt the network they used to communicate back and forth with the company mainframes.
Enter cryptography.
Bingo. Suddenly, all that useless information was extremely valuable. This is what he was talking about, by the way. Encrypt these networks for big companies so they could plug their Palm Pilots into dial-up jacks and feel secure. Thiel said, great, and gave him 1/4 of Thiel's hedge fund money, $250,000 to create encrypted networks for Palm Pilots.
Chapter 1. Field link.
Now, Peter Thiel did something right here, putting that big brain aside and investing in the 23-year-old Levchin after one coffee date. And though things are about to move at an incredible speed, at this point, the two hadn't pieced together that Palm Pilots were not a very good product, meaning that mass consumption of handheld computers was not going to happen for another decade. And demand for network encryption wasn't going to proliferate for almost 2. It was like 2012 before that became a big in-demand technology. When Peter and Max came knocking with their encrypted Palm Pilot technology, the big software companies whose support their success would require got to work ignoring them. And their company, FieldLink, basically went to nothing. Without that support, they did not have a company. So within a few months, the two decided to pivot. Palm Pilot was releasing its 2 megabyte Palm 3.
2 megabyte.
I know, which would come with an infrared transmitter capable of sending contact information without connecting to a dial-up line.
Ooh.
What if, the two thought, we use this technology to send a digital IOU from Palm 3 to Palm 3? The transaction could then be reconciled when the Palm 3 was docked and could connect to a bank account. It was at this moment that the duo decided their business needed a new name.
Chapter 1A. Confinity is going to bring about an apocalypse.
Infinite confidence. That's the origin of that name. Confinity. In theory, because they want users to have confidence in the functionality of their program. But I would posit that this is also pretty effectively describing the sentiment of the two founders. Peter and Levchin were on the cusp of a windfall, but that wouldn't materialize until the two began thinking small. On this front, they had a long way to go. Although almost no one used Palm Pilots at this time, Peter, conservative by birth, and Levchin, libertarian by way of a Soviet childhood, which makes a lot of sense, had made it up in their mind that what they were creating wasn't a way to pay each other digitally. No, this was a whole new currency. And soon, it would be its own medium for commerce as a whole, eventually becoming the new groundwork for the global economy.
These are Bitcoin bros in like the 90s.
Dude, brace yourself, because what you just said is going to become so prescient over the course of this episode.
So, like, to those who think that we're exaggerating here, Peter unironically described to a reporter how his product, which shared a naming convention with the Scrub Daddy, would lead to the erosion of the nation state.
Yes, here Peter's brain, again, is getting in the way of his success. Here's a path towards using Confinity's product, PayPal, to take over the entire world. It's just going to require that Palm Pilots are adopted by people like me and Money Mike, that PayPal IOUs are accepted by companies as an alternative to the dollar, and that people begin accepting payment in these digital IOUs in lieu of ordinary dollars for work they do. Simple. As a result, every man, woman, and child will have access to an anonymous foreign bank account, and economies of the world would be beyond government control. Hyperinflation, wreaking havoc in Venezuela, and you're unable to buy US dollars to hedge your bet? No problem, everyone. Just take out your Palm Pilot, navigate to your anonymous foreign bank accounts, and convert all your Bolivar to PayPal IOUs. Oh shit, we are blowing up on eBay. Here's PayPal's metamorphosis. Near inevitable for ambitious tech startups and often completely beyond the control of their founders. The big downgrade.
This machine will help stimulate the nerves in the back of a paralyzed individual, allowing them to one day walk again. Oh shit, this is actually really selling as a butt scratcher. I like money more than changing the world. Let's do that.
Yeah, we're going to end world hunger. Oh shit, this is blowing up by mailing food to people each week. Let's just do that. Now, did Peter really think PayPal was going to usher in a new world order? Or was it just fodder for investors? Here's the thing. I think Peter believed this. I think he believed it, man. I think he believed he was creating something that was going to take over the world. Surely his belief here is the result of an absurd lack of knowledge of banking infrastructure, which is going to be proven out here shortly. And to be sure, world domination is a stupid and dangerous end goal for a founder to be sharing with the press. But I want to stress two things about this. Number one, Peter is not alone here. This sentiment at this moment in time defines most Silicon Valley startups. Everyone thinks their startup at this time is going to transform their planet. Number two, this sort of blind confidence in this moment of time is necessary for Confinity's survival. Peter proselytizing about bringing an end to government with his platform, the Microsoft of payments, proved pivotal in helping him to raise $3 million from investors in 1999. By the way, founders do this end of the world preaching to this day. See Sam Altman, we did an episode on him. After the $3 million funding round, Peter and Max hired a handful of old friends and got themselves an office space. During the interviews for new hires, Peter Thiel would ask a few brain teasers and then pose the question, how do we destroy our competition? The arena in which PayPal fought was packed. eBay had BillPoint, Amazon had Accept.com, Yahoo had PayDirect, and there was X.com just down the hall. The two companies, X.com and Confinity, would be introduced to one another by way of their shared trash bin in the alley behind the building. It was there that a discarded X.com business plan was discovered by Thiel's team.
Now this is where our episode becomes a crossover that no one ever wanted. Because we all know who loves naming their companies X? Well, that would be our boy, Elon Musk. And we'll go into this in great detail shortly, but I think that this little tidbit is a good illustration of the relationship that these two would come to forge. Elon was dumb enough to allow a near complete business plan to be thrown in a shared trash can, and Peter Thiel was conniving enough to dig it out.
Yes. Confinity staff would later say, perhaps in jest, that the strategy of paying every new user $10 was lifted from this X.com business plan, which included giving new users $20, which is hard to prove. And also, it worked, but it's kind of a bad idea. Another coincidence, perhaps, in the fall of 1999, about a year after Thiel and Levchin met, keep in mind, and shortly after they moved to a bigger office, they built a shitty web page for PayPal, allowing it to be accessed from a desktop, which was similar to X, obviously. And the following month, January 2000, they raised another $23 million from Goldman Sachs and Idealab.
Chapter 3, eBay, PayPal's big downgrade and ultimate salvation.
Now, again, a lot of folks were racing to address this, but the way that eBay worked after its founding was that after bidding, a user would go to the post office and purchase and mail a money order to a seller on the site. Sellers would then have to take the money order to a bank to cash it. It is incredible to me that eBay reached the status of a credible company with such an absurd strategy, but they did. Unsurprisingly, people began looking for workarounds to this nightmare as soon as they could, and when some people started using Thiel's world domination startup to buy stuff on the platform, the team noticed. Among Levchin's very first moves to capitalize on this use case was to create a program that thwarted eBay's terms of services by offering to buy items from sellers so long as the seller used PayPal. Again, this is a very expensive strategy. We mentioned this earlier, but the $10 sign-up bonus was also in play, and users could get an extra $10 by referring friends, all of which was immediately available to withdraw. God, the internet used to be so friendly to its users.
They got us. They got us.
Dude, they roped us in. Yeah.
I think Netflix is $18 a month now.
I can't even steal it anymore, so honestly, man, I just watch it at your place.
I'm the sucker. It's fine.
Gotta steal cable from somewhere.
I think my wife pays for it, so technically we're both just leeches.
Thank you, Money Mike's wife. We love you.
Oh, Jesus.
Now, this was a very successful means of scaling, and by April of the following year, just 5 months after opening their doors, again, this all moves at a blistering speed. PayPal had onboarded 1 million users. Now, this was a record in Silicon Valley, but more importantly, because so many investors around this time were valuing online financial service companies by user numbers, PayPal can now claim a valuation between $100 million and $1 billion.
Which is a pretty big window, right? Like, yeah,
There's a range
I'm between
there.
4 and 8 feet tall.
This is putting on your Tinder profile, I'm between 5'6" and 80 feet tall.
Yeah, right. I'm actually a skyscraper. That's financial valuation at its goddamn best. It's like, yeah, we think that this company is worth a number.
Ironically, though, when it came to money, this put PayPal in a dire position. Although this strategy of theirs had allowed for explosive growth, it was also obviously very expensive. Just onboarding someone with the $10 sign-on and $10 referrals for buddies was averaging about $20 per person. Everyone has at least one friend.
Oh, no.
Shit! Peter hadn't accounted for that. Do that math on 1 million users and then subtract that from the 28 million they had raised up to this point. This looks bad, and the fact that membership is free made it look a little worse. But Thiel put investors' mind at ease. Fear not, investors. You haven't even thought about the float.
Which is just money sitting in users' accounts that could earn interest for PayPal.
We're a bank.
They weren't registered as a bank.
We'll make money off the capital sitting in accounts.
The only money sitting in accounts was PayPal sign-on money.
When pressed on the need to one day adhere to banking regulations, Thiel around this time would tell a journalist, "No one knows what defines a bank. There's no clear standard." There is a clear standard, Peter. Banks are a defined thing. What are you talking about? What made this worse is that PayPal was also paying the credit card surcharges on each transactions, which were typically 3%. With this math, a $100 transaction would cost PayPal $3. What this means is activity on the platform at this time was literally poisoned to confinity. If the transaction was found to be fraudulent, by the way, the card companies could just force PayPal to remit the entire payment amount via a chargeback. Incidentally, this was the same mechanism PayPal was using to remit the referral fee to users who attached a credit card to their PayPal account, an approach banned by credit card companies. This company was a disaster.
And eBay executives are watching this from the outside and looking in. They're like, I don't fucking get it.
What's going on?
BillPoint, a competitor, by the standards of the late 90s, was being introduced pretty responsibly.
Yeah.
Because it was young, it was only available for use to top eBay sellers. Work out the bugs first.
Well, here's the funny thing is I think this is the start of people giving Peter Thiel too much credit. All these eBay execs are looking over and going, I don't get it. I guess these guys must just be thinking on a new plane of consciousness. How this company is profiting, it makes no sense to us earthly beings.
Yeah,
and in reality, they're just hemorrhaging money.
There's so much money going out and not much money going in. I guess they've just figured out how to make that a profitable conversation.
We've got our best quantitative experts on this, and they are puzzled. How are they doing this? Looking back on this and trying to assign meaning, commentators on PayPal's choices at this time would point to these decisions as intentional. It's the birth of blitz scaling. Come in with VC dollars, price all of your competition out of the market until they fold, and then worry about profitability.
Which is the defining strategy of the last 20 years of Silicon Valley. The only thing that Rad Bill missed is when you start worrying about profitability, you make your service worse than whatever you replace.
Yes, you make it far worse than anything else that preceded it. Flail around, weather the chaos, assign reason to your actions after the fact. Despite the story that's told today, all through this process, Peter Thiel was freaking the hell out. This was not a game of chess for the guy. He is worried about losing the business. His constant worry and desire to make the losses somebody else's problem was concerning to his investors as well, which is no surprise. He approached Reid Hoffman about finding a buyer for PayPal, and when Hoffman set up meetings with Yahoo and Verisign, a newly established online credit card processor, word got out to the founder of X.com. Horrified by the prospect of a Goliath like Yahoo coming in and pushing X.com out of the market, Elon approached Peter Thiel about a merger. And in February 2000, the two met to discuss and were surprised by the compatibility of the two operations for a merger.
Chapter X. Elon Musk.
Musk had dropped out of Stanford.
Or maybe never gotten in.
Founded and had been promptly removed from Zip2 as well, but because of his ownership stake in that company, the ultimate sale of Zip2 in 1999 would still net him $22 million. So where Thiel & Co. had to court investors almost constantly, Musk had the luxury of being able to fund his own ambitions in the internet banking space. He bought a McLaren F1, and the rest he figured could go towards expenses at X. Perhaps as a result, his vision was still in the world domination phase when he was formally introduced to Peter Thiel. X offered online payments, checking accounts, stock trades, and a line of mutual funds. Elon's hope was that people would leave payments from friends on X.com and eventually put all of their money on the site, same as Peter's basically.
Unsurprisingly, at the time of their meeting, capitalizing on the float just wasn't working for Elon either. They're trying to figure out, how the fuck do we make money at this, man?
Both people have a disaster on their hands.
Yeah, exactly.
However, with this idea, his reputation still very much intact at this point, and a demo site, Musk raised $25 million in an investment round led by Michael Moritz of Sequoia Capital the same year he got started, which is obviously more than the $3 million that Thiel was able to secure his first round. So Musk had gotten to work blowing it in that time. Long before Thiel's team implemented the strategy, Elon decided to offer $20 to whoever signed up for an account on X.com and an additional $10 for any friend a person referred to the program. What I'll say to contrast Musk and Thiel's regard for banking regulations and conventions is this. Thiel was stealing sand from others to make the perfect sandcastle. Musk was eating it. Quick and easy sign-up was important to Musk, who bragged that it was easier to sign up for an X.com account than an email address. Sign up in 2 minutes. Use any name you want as long as it isn't taken, and boom, you're in your account $20 richer. Know your customer principles have been widely adopted by banking institutions who can be held liable for failing to report customer wrongdoing. To adhere, They ask customers for some identifier, typically ID, so they know who's doing bad guy shit when they do bad guy shit. Musk wasn't doing any of this. Not because X.com wasn't a bank, similar to PayPal. It was. He registered it as a bank. That's like the one intelligent thing he'd done, and it now posed an enormous threat to his business. He didn't do it because he didn't know that that was something banks did. Looks like dildobaggins69 at gmail.com could be laundering money. Not sure who that is, authorities, but you should check it out.
The name Dildo Baggins was probably taken on X.com, as was Dildo Baggins 69, Dildo Baggins 69 420, and Dildo Baggins 420 123. There's a reasonable chance that none of these people were the real Dildo Baggins. That's a huge problem.
This is a massive issue for Elon Musk. Every day, USPS would deliver an enormous bag of returned letters that X had sent to new customers at fake addresses. The employer responsible for such matters addressed these returned to senders to the best of his abilities by shoving them into a safe at the X.com office, which I suppose is as good as any drawer. What many chose to do after receiving a checkbook for their moneyed alter ego, unsurprisingly, was commit fraud. Dildo Baggins 1 to 1 million went on extravagant shopping sprees, writing bad checks the whole time.
Oh my God.
This issue was a concern for Thiel's team, but it wasn't entirely clear that Musk understood the problem at all. There was no risk mitigation whatsoever, said someone hired to Musk's fraud division. The ambassador for a bank Musk had partnered with left Musk stumped when they complained to him about checks bouncing. According to our source, Musk responded in kind. I don't understand. If you don't have money in an account, why would you write a check?
Dude, as someone who works in finance, this is just a special type of hilarious. Chapter 3:2, a Nazi and a gay man meet in the closet and join forces.
Sitting at that table to discuss a merger, Peter and Elon recognized the might of the person at the other side of the table. Both had about half of eBay's billing market share, which is important. They each had about 200,000 regular users, and crucially, they were both set to lose $25 million in the first quarter of the year 2000. Joining forces would mean two things. Number one, a better shot at survival. Number two, an easier time dealing with regulators if that ever became a problem, which so far it had not. The two agreed to a 50-50 merger, though because of X's somewhat famous founder and very famous investors, X.com were the stated buyers. The name Confinity was retired and PayPal became a product of X. Thanks to the invested Zip2 money, Musk became the largest shareholder and Ed Ho, a partner of Musk's at X.com, would serve as the CEO. The appointed executive staff beyond the C-suite and chairman position were mostly Confinity alums, which will become important later.
Yeah, this is the spring of 2000, which means that the dot-com crash was coming fast.
Yes, it was. Speaking of crashes, Elon and Thiel's business relationship wouldn't get off to a strong start. To get to Morris's office for one of their first meetings post-merger, the two carpooled in Musk's insane $1 million car, the McLaren F1. Deco, I'm sure you're already at least somewhat familiar with this car, but it's a three-seater. The driver, Elon Musk, sits in the middle, and Peter Thiel crams into one of the two seats that flank the front seat that sits in the middle. Elon then goes, "Hey, look at how fast this thing can go," and stomps the gas, propelling the car to 60 miles per hour in almost 3 seconds flat. The car goes down into an embankment, up far into the air, and back down into the street hard, totaling the McLaren F1. The two walked away unscathed. You know, I read all these stories about people who made money and bought sports cars and then crashed them, but I knew it would never happen to me, so I didn't get any insurance.
Was it Spectrum Woes who was like, I don't want to sound like an asshole, but Elon Musk had the chance to fix our fucking timeline when he got in that car accident. Spectrum Woes, I laughed about that for like 2 days.
I know.
In fact, I stole that joke. I gave you credit. I stole that joke and told it to somebody else. And I was like, God, no one has summed up this story so fucking well.
Yep. God. Almost getting musked rattled Thiel almost as much as almost getting 9/11 a year later, and the bitter foundation of their relationship was set in stone. This was now the largest shareholder of Peter Thiel's company.
Chapter 2, Creating an Underworld.
So this, I feel like, is a byproduct of the type of world domination Thiel and Musk were seeking at the outset. And I think about Bitcoin a shitload here. Money, Mike, to your earlier point. Changing the world and scaling a new type of money is pricey. eBay was an excellent resource to scale these businesses, but what kept the lights on for the two, Elon and Peter, was porn and gambling, the cornerstone of so many of today's institutions. Were these markets the two founders sought out? No. In fact, porn and gambling sort of came to them as free money, as they hadn't thought to prohibit the practices. Things were just moving so fast. Porn and gambling were unsurprisingly exploding on the internet at this time, and where big banks and credit card companies saw a new reason to clutch their strained and badly throttled pearls, PayPal seized the opportunity to plant roots by tucking the pill into a piece of cheese, as a manner of speaking. Banks and credit card companies would refuse a charge they could directly affiliate with gambling or porn, but with PayPal attached, the transaction would reach the bank for processing, bearing the moniker e-commerce.
Well, and people could hide their online habits from their wife.
Totally. Yeah, it's not coming off. It's not coming out in the bank statement in the mail at the end of the month just saying porn in capitalized letters or whatever.
www.ilookedatporn.com.
Though it wasn't their idea, when folks at PayPal got wise to this, they leaned in and marketed explicitly to this user base. Ironically, this was an opportunity for the company trying to be a bank to be more like a bank by being less like a bank. They programmed in a little workaround allowing users to load up their PayPal accounts and then use those sitting funds to make purchases. Suddenly, money was sitting in accounts, bank style. And as a bonus, because credit card companies weren't involved in the point of sale when porn was purchased, when money was deposited at some online casino, PayPal wasn't having to pay the 3% credit card surcharges. Win, win, win. In no time, the two categories, porn and gambling, represented 30% of PayPal's business. Hard to emphasize how critically gambling, and especially porn, have been to the modern internet. We owe our entire digital ecosystem to porn, and the sex workers that make it happen seem to be tossed aside the minute the platform thinks they can do without them. For gambling, PayPal luxuriated in 4% transaction fees and 10 to 15% holds on each deposit to account for fraud. It was everything they needed.
Chapter 4, The Ousting and Sale. Part 1, The Ousting.
In May of 2000, Ed Ho, the CEO of X.com, left, and Musk appointed himself CEO. Investors seemed enthusiastic about the development and showed their high spirits by funneling another $100 million into the company. To celebrate this windfall, Thiel disappeared. Moritz called to plead for him to come back, but Peter waved him off, eventually sending an email that read, "The time is right to give Musk the reins, to continue implementing our plans for world domination." When they asked, Peter told employees that he was exhausted and more of a visionary than a manager. To this end, Musk thought he was just a sociopath and felt that Thiel leaving him to run things solo was just a natural step here.
Elon Musk calling you a sociopath is a special kind of insult.
Isn't that crazy? For the record, by the way, according to an unknown mutual friend, Thiel thought Musk was a giant fraud. Neither man liked the other.
Imagine that. Chapter 4, Part 2. Was that the ousting? When is the sale?
Musk had two problems that would unfold over the next 2 months. Number one, the dot-com bubble was popping in real time. It began a month before Musk took CEO, and by end of year, something like 80% of dot-coms were ready to fail. Musk is a dot-com millionaire. He thrives in markets where people make millions off of stupid, high-level ideas and a cult following. Also, he's what I'll call a fair weather leader. He's a great leader when things are going great, and all you need out of a leader is someone to give high fives and not pull their dick out. The next several months are going to be rough on both counts. Not the dick thing, the dot-com millionaire thing, and the fair weather leader thing. The
Thank
dick
you for
thing wouldn't
clearing
be a
that up. I
problem
was
for
like,
another
what?
decade. Yeah.
Put your dick away, Elon.
Yeah. We know this becomes a problem later, but
Yeah,
Jesus.
but goddamn.
Number 2, Roelof Botha, who's going to be the CFO of PayPal in short order, is going to realize that they've been badly underestimating their fraud problem. The team came up with a clunky way to prevent people from stealing banking info where they deposit 2 very small amounts into a person's bank account and ask them to verify those 2 amounts. A lot of you listening are going, oh shit, that's where it came from. Yes, clever enough, still used to this day as far as I know, but they still hadn't found a good way of addressing the chargeback issue. And we're about to find out how little Elon cared and how bad the issue really was. To be clear, the PayPal team knew this was a real problem. It looked to them like 1% of all transactions on PayPal were incurring a chargeback each month, which is insanely bad.
That's bad.
What they didn't know, which was common knowledge to everyone else in the payment industry, was that people don't have to report fraud immediately or even within a 30-day span, which was the measurement this very young company was using to soothe concerned investors. People have about 4 months to report fraud, 120 days. They could report it long after the sign-up bonus had been spent and the billing period had ended. And at this time, PayPal hadn't even been servicing 1 million people for 4 months. They'd only been operating for 8 total. And they're slapping their knees when someone pays a 2% surcharge on gambling payments. While Roelof's looking at chargeback data, he's now starting to realize that chargebacks could easily occur on 2% of all PayPal transactions. The company could theoretically go bankrupt at any minute. However, none of this really fazed Elon Musk. Remember, dot-com bubble boy. They could just get more investment dollars. Who cares if they dance with insolvency here and there? The real focus should be taking over the world. And now that Thiel, Mr. Focus on eBay, was out of the picture, Elon could start making some long overdue changes. Like, what's up with the name PayPal? Why can't it be X PayPal?
I want X in this name.
Eventually, we can just make it something really cool, like X. PayPal was on its way to reaching the peak of marketing Everest, becoming a verb. PayPal me the money, insufferable people were already beginning to say.
Rebranding a company at or just prior to the stage is unfathomable. God help any CEO stupid enough to do such a thing.
Yeah, he pressured the marketing team to do this, and though they thought it was ridiculous, they did the marketing studies and found that customers were turned off by the name X because it reminded them of porn. This might sound familiar to some of you. Musk, however, was undeterred. He'd recently paid $1 million for the domain x.com, so there was no turning back.
Yeah, as a note, Elon's mental well-being wasn't so hot here.
I guess so. Now, this was stupid and had nothing to do with the fraud problem. Unfortunately, neither did Musk's ceaseless demands for software rewrites, which also might sound familiar to some of you.
Dude, how is all of our episodes somehow about Elon Musk? I want this guy out of my fucking life.
Me too. In no time, Musk had burned through the entire $100 million nest egg. The boat was sinking, and all Elon wanted to do was check out other icebergs. Musk had married his first wife in January 2000 and then put off the honeymoon. He figured that now was as good a time as ever to take that honeymoon, so off he went in October of 2000. As he waved goodbye to the staff, who were tired of the rebranding efforts, code rewrites, failure to take fraud seriously, and the dwindling cash reserves, the door closed, and the team got to work planning a coup. Staff had called Peter to fill him in every time Musk had done something stupid, which means the team had stayed in close contact. As Elon boarded the plane, they called Peter again.
If we can get rid of Elon, will you be the CEO?
Yeah. So the team got to work. First, Thiel and Nosek commissioned a new survey to show that Musk was wrong about the name change. When Musk found out, he was in London or Singapore, or one of the two, disrupting his honeymoon to try to find investors for his failing startup. He called staff and demanded that the name PayPal be removed from the website and got to work flying back to the US. Then a plan for their revolt came into focus, and the executive team Elon agreed to when Confinity and X merged became poison to Elon. They were all Thiel loyalists, and all of them, and Roelof Botha, a Musk hire, agreed that they would threaten to resign if the board didn't fire Elon and install Thiel as CEO. The next day, executives circulated a petition throughout the company, a thing that actually affects change in this case, and Legacy X employees were basically completely excluded from this. They were all kept in the dark. Next, Botha and Levchin, who was the top coder and most valuable member of the team, confronted Moritz with the petition and a pile of resignation letters. If Moritz kept Musk, he would have to wave goodbye to Levchin, again the most important person at the company, and half the dev team. It would be over. So he agreed. The only caveat was that Thiel would be brought back on a temporary basis. Thiel accepted. Legacy X employees complained about the secrecy and said things like, "Musk is actually a genius, you just don't understand his mind." But when the time came to shit or get off the pot, almost no one resigned in protest. When real money is on the line, no one who knows him backs a dipshit like Elon Musk.
Chapter 4. Okay, that was the ousting. Clearly, let's take a quick intermission to set the table for the sale.
With Thiel in the driver's seat, the team zoomed back in. This is an eBay thing now. Let's focus on making it an eBay thing. But first, why don't we take all of PayPal's remaining capital and put it in my hedge fund so I can invest it? This was Peter Thiel's first idea back in the driver's seat, and it went over like a lead balloon. Any semblance of friendship between Thiel and Moritz was now enmity. However, Thiel did drill into the fraud matter, and before year-end, the team had it sorted. Levchin, unsurprisingly, played a big role in this operation. He invented what's now called a CAPTCHA, a series of letters shown over an X in a picture. Easy for us, at least back then, very hard for computers. John Kathonic led fraud investigations for the company, and his breakthrough went the rest of the way to saving the business on this front. He went back to Corkboard and Yarn and realized that a bunch of shell accounts were paying what appeared to be one feeder. All signs pointed to one man, Elon Musk. Not really. It was a Russian man who had stolen between $15 and $20 million on his own. And keep in mind, $20 million in chargebacks represents a considerable portion of the $100 million nest egg Elon had just blown.
Dude, we need to do an episode on him.
I know.
He's the real profiteer here.
I know.
He made more money than any of these motherfuckers.
It kind of rules. And the people who paid him were Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, two of the shittiest people on the West Coast.
Is this man Robin Hood?
Levchin and his team got to work automating the spider web. Think butt scratcher. Arrests were made and fraud on PayPal halved. The system they built was so good it wound up getting adopted by the FBI, and suddenly PayPal, the keystone of a new world order, was now making a big show of its cooperation with law enforcement and its willingness to share with them its enormous bank of customer data. Now, the dot-com bust was bad for tech startups, but I think it was also the first big hint consumers got that our honeymoon phase with big tech was just that, a honeymoon phase. Towards the end of the year 2000, the rivers of venture capital began to dry, and thus, tech companies, including PayPal, had to start finding ways to come up with money on their own, like a business or something.
Like a business? Oh, no!
Oh, shit!
We have to be profitable!
For PayPal, the strategy became forcing eBay sellers to sign up for business accounts, which would demand a 2% fee on each sale. What this meant was that the company would now make a profit on some transactions. This was among the very first times we saw a software company blitzscale, quote unquote, and it fucking worked. For PayPal, it worked. When the time came for the company to start worrying about a profit, they had something close to a monopoly here, which meant eBay sellers could complain, but their only real course of action was to bare their teeth and take the hit. Porn and gambling would continue to carry some weight, but before long, the subpoenas started flowing and the company's status as technically not a bank started becoming a problem again. They settled cases with the AGs in New York and the Eastern District of Missouri, but when Louisiana, California, and Idaho brought cases, Thiel and his buddies got to work lobbying Congress members. Keith Raboy, who was forced to go to Harvard, remember, had connections. Thiel had connections. Sachs, the author of the rape issue of the Stanford Review, had connections, and plenty of others had connections. With these connections and $40,000 raised from the PayPal staff, which was, by the way, dispersed to several members of the House and Senate, the company survived just fine through these subpoenas. Legislation was delayed to whatever degree, and members of the House Finance Committee wrote letters to the C-suite at Visa and MasterCard at PayPal's request, threatening antitrust hearings if the companies blocked PayPal transactions.
That's what it weaponize Senate for $40,000?
And the House, $40,000. Jesus. As far as Silicon Valley was concerned, this was uncharted territory. For decades on either side of this moment, most startups are aggressively apolitical, especially at PayPal's size in this moment.
Chapter 4, Part 3. Back in action towards a sale.
Almost all of PayPal's above-board revenue came from eBay, an area that they got initial traction almost incidentally and then just dug in. This success put them at odds with eBay's CEO, Meg Whitman, who was trying and failing to scale BillPoint, which was an in-house payment processor. Her apparent ability to throw them off the platform whenever she wanted would, on any ordinary planet, make diplomacy a no-brainer. But at Thiel's office, her face was on dartboards because the PayPal team knew a dark secret of hers. Although she was a tech exec and a big name in Silicon Valley, Meg Whitman was also an East Coast Harvard MBA Ivy League conformist.
Ew! Yucky, Meg!
To the largely right-wing PayPal crowd, this was poison. As such, inroads were never attempted, and before long, Whitman was understandably expressing vocal disapproval of PayPal's moves, which often flouted eBay terms of service. I mean, they were a problem. Tension came to a head when eBay introduced a seller's platform that mandated use of BillPoint. When Hoffman, an ambassador for PayPal, called and threatened antitrust action, a hilarious move, by the way, all things considered. Think about this. This is a company that is building out its own platform, and someone is reaching out before they're done and going, hey, we beat you to the punch on building out that part of your platform, so if you finish building it, we're going to sue your asses. That's crazy, right? Am I crazy?
I mean, like, it's definitely not as easy as being like, hey, do you want to buy us?
Right? As such, and to that end, eBay backed off, and Whitman offered an olive branch.
Yep, her head's where mine is. Let's just buy you.
Yeah, let us buy you. The last several chapters mention a sale in the title to illustrate Thiel's mindset on this thing. Thiel, since the starting of PayPal, has been dying to offload PayPal. Let it be someone's problem. Let the losses be someone else's problem, is his mindset. So towards the end of the year, when Whitman gave a number in the form of an ultimatum, Thiel was scared shitless and wanted to go for it. Take $300 million, which is lowball offer, or we're teaming up with Wells Fargo to, and this is a quote from the book, kick the shit out of you.
Hell yeah.
Given PayPal's towering losses and the fallout from the dot-com bubble, it was pretty ironic that Moritz was the one begging them not to sell this thing. Thiel ultimately agreed to seek other offers and would later meet with Sandy Weil of Citigroup, which was a bust. But by the summer, Thiel noticed something promising. Though profitability was a long shot, the company's losses were shrinking. At this point, Peter was looking at $28 million in losses to $20 million in revenue. With a narrative like that, PayPal could look at going public, though going public would have to be done by the books, meaning their prospectus would have to disclose the software piracy, money laundering, gambling, porn, and worst of all, child porn the company was enabling. Even so, the bankers Thiel spoke with believed this could bring a valuation considerably north of that $300 million. Big news. Here, Thiel decided it was time for an ultimatum of his own. The board was also terrified given the current climate and the company's losses. Musk, at this moment in time, owned 14% of the company and had done almost nothing but make things worse. And Thiel and Levchin each owned 3%. So Thiel asked for an equity bump and threatened to resign that day if he didn't get it, knowing full well that a rebound from his departure would incur months of downtime and millions of dollars. Bear in mind, they turned down eBay's offer, which meant theoretically, the arrival of the Wells Fargo shit-kicking was only a matter of time. Thiel was done turning down offers that would make him enormously rich without some assurances that he would be rich either way, and the board couldn't refuse. So, Thiel's stake in the company was almost doubled, from 3% to 5.6%. For those interested, the board did this by selling Thiel 4.5 million shares, soon to be worth over $20 million for just $1.5 million, and then they lent him the money to buy these shares. Now, rather than using the full loan amount, Thiel kicked in $500,000 from his Roth IRA to buy a portion of these shares, and as such, somehow, the entire profit from this hostage negotiation would be tax-free. For those curious about this, it is illegal to use Roth IRA funds to buy stock in a company that you control, though because Thiel didn't technically control the company, he had legal gray area to lean on. When it was discovered 10 years later, there were billions inside that Roth IRA, and Thiel had all the money he needed to mount a legal defense. On September 10th, to prepare for their IPO, Thiel and Boda met with Morgan Stanley in New York. The meeting was a disaster, in part because Whitman around this time had been calling big banks prior to their meetings with PayPal and explaining how PayPal depended on eBay and was doomed on its own. Also, the bankers couldn't understand if PayPal was a bank or a tech company, and Peter seemed incapable of clarifying this. Boda, who was their CFO, was 27 years old, which was not well received either. I don't know if you can imagine this, but like sitting across the thing and going, all right, so you're the founder of the company, Peter. Yeah, great, got it. Is this an intern? No, it's our CFO. That's fucked up.
Hey, Boda, can you give me a coffee or something? 2 creams, no sugar.
Morgan Stanley, as a result, would not be participating in the IPO, and the two men were laughed out of the room. The JFK flight home was delayed for hours, and although the two were offered room and board at a nearby hotel and a morning flight, they chose instead to wallow in dejected silence until seats became available on something that evening. They made it home on a red eye, and hours later, planes began smacking into the Pentagon and World Trade Center complex. Flight UA-93 from Newark to San Francisco that morning, which the two seemingly could have been on, was hijacked and smacked into a field in Pennsylvania. Their self-pity had possibly saved their lives. Peter hadn't been this horrified since Elon tried to kill the pair in his $1 million car.
2 chances, man.
Two chances
to correct the timeline. And here we are.
On September 28th, they filed their prospectus with the SEC. There hadn't been an IPO since 9/11. The book makes this sound like it's been a long time, but it's only been 2 weeks.
I actually wonder how often IPO filings happen.
This gave me pause here too. Like, is 2 weeks a huge gulf? Because I used to work in an environment where CNBC was on all the time, and I don't feel like televised like bell rings happened all that often for those IPOs.
How many IPOs are filed in the U.S. per day? Okay, number of IPOs by year. 2021 had an all-time record of 1,035 IPOs. 2020 saw 480, and 2024 had 84. Interesting. So
2024 had only 84.
I wonder if that's an economic indicator, but it looks like before the pandemic, 2019, 232, 2020, 480. Dude, were people just stuck at home starting companies and IPOing them? What the fuck?
Holy shit, that is crazy.
There have been 20 so far in 2025. So yeah, it looks like
that's a big deal. 2 weeks without an IPO is
yes. It looks like about one every day or two is kind of par for the course. So yeah, that was a while. We were all mourning and not taking our companies public.
2 vacant weeks, void of an IPO.
Honestly, probably like no one wanted to be the first one. Like
I know, right?
Like the first company to IPO, it's like, all right, like if you do it, I'll do it. But like, I don't want to be the first one to like break the mourning period.
Leave it to Thiel.
I bet you like one of his buddies was doing an IPO and they were like, hey, yeah, so like when are you taking your company public? He's like, I don't know. I figure I'll give it a couple weeks, kind of let the dust settle, quite literally.
Yeah. Thiel's just told me like, whenever. I wanted to do it on September 12th, but they said no.
Yeah, I tried to do it on the 11th, but I couldn't get anybody on the phone.
There hadn't been an IPO since 9/11 over 2 weeks ago, and PayPal couldn't show a profit. Whitman offered $900 million around this time, which upped the pressure considerably. And Thiel wanted to go for it, but the board said no. By the way, the board is the real reason that PayPal sold for so much. Again and again and again. Thiel is going, oh yeah, let's sell it at $3 million. Oh my God, let's sell it at $900 million. And he's going to keep doing that.
I would have.
Yeah, me too.
Like $30,000.
Dude, me too.
You mean my idiot porn company can make me some money? All right, I mean.
Dude, I can pay off my car for that.
Yeah, exactly. That's worthwhile.
All right.
Good job.
Yeah. Ultimately, PayPal stock began trading on February 14th, 2002, and shot from $13 to $20. Whitman's efforts, though rigorous, had been a failure. Thiel's shares were locked up for 6 months after the IPO, but he stayed optimistic that Whitman might offer something above the company's market cap so he could sell the friggin' thing without consent from the board. Weeks after the IPO, his dreams came true. Whitman offered $1.2 billion, and Thiel agreed, though he reneged and asked for more after news of the deal leaked in mid-April, and PayPal's stock began climbing. Whitman at this point decided she was done doing business with Thiel and ordered her deputies to sever contact. For whatever reason, PayPal was able to keep a booth they'd ordered for eBay Live, which was this huge eBay sellers event. If they couldn't sell to eBay, Thiel and David Sachs figured, mind you, Sachs is the author of Stanford Review's Rape Issue, they decided instead that they would humiliate eBay. The night before the big speaking event at which Whitman would speak to, PayPal held a cocktail party across the street. 2,000 eBay sellers showed up, and each of them received a PayPal t-shirt. And PayPal announced they were all entered into a drawing for $250 at the eBay event the next day. But to collect the winnings, the person whose name was called would need to be wearing that PayPal shirt.
That's diabolical as fuck, dude.
Downright.
Like, they spent probably $1,000 ruining the day of someone who had just offered them $1.2 billion for their company.
Crazy shit.
Talk about the ROI. They probably laughed about that for years afterwards.
I would still be laughing about it. I mean, these guys are bastards, but credit where credit is due. This is A, pretty funny, B, pretty smart. When Whitman delivered her keynote the following day, a fourth of the crowd was wearing PayPal t-shirts. eBay's Jeff Jordan called Sachs the next day and suggested attempting the sale one more time. On July 2nd, the two met again and agreed on a price, about $1.5 billion, which would be paid in eBay stock. Timing was on their side during negotiations, too. Trading would be light around the 4th of July holiday, and both Thiel and Whitman would be out of town for the 4th, so Thiel, in theory, couldn't derail things by trolling Whitman, which he was one to do. Both boards approved the deal, and it was done by the end of the week. Peter Thiel had owned 4% of the company after the IPO, which means he was due stock worth more than $50 million. Officially, he would be staying on to continue running what would now be an eBay subsidiary, but when the deal was announced on October 3rd, 2002, so was Thiel's resignation. Max Levchin was shocked. What you talking about, Willis? He was going back to running a hedge fund, which would be called Clarion Capital, and PayPal would now be headed by a McKinsey alum who had been a VP at eBay. East Coast Ivy League globalist. The exact kind of person Thiel had trained his staff to despise and rebel against. So off goes Peter Thiel to start Clarion Capital.
No chapter header. Clarion Capital.
The chapters in this episode are out of order and mislabeled as an illustration of just how chaotic running a startup can be and how incidental success can wind up becoming. But a hedge fund, though considered by the tech crowd to be antithetical, had something that Peter longed for: predictability. Finally, Peter had something he had been missing up to this point, which was required: a big name and reputation. Clarion's investment thesis was that the tech bubble collapse should have led to a depression, which was only thwarted by interest rates and high levels of borrowing by consumers. Oil prices were bound to rise, which would further damage America's prospects. Thiel was betting that the U.S. was going down.
When was this?
2002.
Okay.
Not far off.
Early to
He's
the
early
party,
to the
but
show.
there's a party coming.
There's a party coming. Clarion was a combination hedge fund, startup, and think tank. And though Ken Howery, PayPal's original CFO, Nathan Lynn and Joe Lonsdale, both Stanford Review and PayPal alum, were hired to make investments, Thiel did almost all of the investing. The team was paid well and given, exceptional benefits. Food was paid for. Vacations were paid for. They all got complimentary physical training sessions and got assistance to help with work and with housekeeping. But also, no one really did all that much work. They all left by 3 o'clock each day. One investor who started working with the firm in 2003 commented that he made one investment every 2 years. Then he'd just watch.
Sick.
Fuck. Yeah.
No
Pretty
notes.
sick.
No notes. I want to work with Clarion Capital.
Yeah, fucking A. Peter Thiel's pretty good. Goddamn employer. The typical hire was young, had impressive academic credentials, and was right-leaning. No surprise there. By 2004, Clarion had $260 million under management, and returns were up 125%. Word was out, and Thiel's fund would see explosive success after this. When there was work to do, Thiel took a McKinsey-like approach to delegation. 1 or 2 people would be tasked with looking into a trade or managing an amount of money. Anyone who did well would get more. Anyone who didn't would just be ignored, though never fired. Clarion saw 60% returns in 2005, and by 2006, the company had $2 billion under management. In August 2007, 4 months before the recession began, Thiel called it. Close to a year before most Americans realized the economy was falling apart, he sent a letter to investors claiming that the economic expansion was now over. The long boom has given way to a long goodbye, said the letter. There would soon be a painful deleveraging and a reduction in liquidity, which we mortals know as a financial crisis. So they began shorting the dollar and betting against any company that was borrowing a lot of money. The returns were huge, jumping from 5% in November of 2007 to 13% in December to 24% in January. While most other funds took a bath, Thiel's return for the first half of 2008 was almost 60%. At this mark, Clarion had $6.4 billion under management. Thiel flew the entire team out to Maui on a private jet, but when the real fallout began, bailouts were issued to the big banks and car makers, and the U.S. didn't burn to the ground. Thiel's complicated macro investment strategy stood no chance against this sort of intervention, and as a result, Thiel's hedge fund ultimately failed again. And that's where we'll pick up next time.
Thanks so much for listening to us, gang, and we will talk to you next time.
Be sure to check out our subreddit. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Help us with this fucking algorithm, y'all. Deco19. Thanks again, babe. We love you all, and goodbye.